Hope everyone is doing well. Wanted to take a look at the small Sebenza 31. It's an S45VN steel. When I was looking online, before I bought my first Sebenza, I watched a lot of videos to see if I would like this knife. Now that I own it, it's my favorite blade. But I think that there's some more information that people might be interested in. So I wanted to create a video that would talk about things that I wish I knew before I bought this knife. And I'm just talking about the advantages, things that I like. So right off the bat, I just today want to focus on the blade shape. I think it has just that really beautiful drop point blade. Just gonna look at that. It's got that hollow ground blade. We know that Chris Reeve knives get really thin behind the edge because of that hollow ground blade. One of the things I love about this blade is just the fact that, I don't know if I can get it to focus, but I love the fact that this blade has a lot of thickness behind that tip. So it's a pretty strong tip and it's a pretty robust blade thickness, but then it is really thin behind the edge when you taper down because of that hollow ground blade. So it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. It gives you a pretty good job with slicing through things like cardboard or other materials, but then you still have that strong tip that you don't have to worry about, and you have that thick blade stock. So you get a slicey blade that's also pretty robust. And so I have a couple other knives here and kind of illustrate what I mean. So this is a Paramilitary 2. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with it. And the one thing that I didn't love about the PM2 was how thin that tip gets. That tip just gets really, really thin. And that was just always something I didn't love. This is a great knife overall. It's probably, a 9 out of 10. The one tiny thing that I didn't love is how thin that tip gets. Otherwise, I don't have any complaints with this knife. Another favorite of mine is the 940. And this blade is very robust. It's a really strong blade. But the problem with the 940 is that because the blade is really thin this way, it's pretty thick behind the edge. So there's not enough room for it to taper down and get thin behind the edge. So if you end up doing a good amount of cardboard cutting, then this blade can be a little bit annoying sometimes because it doesn't pass through material super well. Once again, this is probably a 9 out of 10, maybe a 9.5 out of 10 in terms of blade. I just absolutely love the 940. It's one of my all-time favorites. But with the 940, you had that strong blade, but you just didn't have a thin behind the edge, so it wasn't the best slicer. It could still do pretty well, but just wasn't the best. And with the Paramilitary 2, it's a great slicer, but you had to compromise with that tip strength, and so you had that thin, dainty tip. So I kind of felt like with both of these knives, there was a compromise. One with tip strength and one with sliciness. And with this knife, the small Sebenza 31, I don't feel like I have that sliciness or that compromise, sorry, because I have the sliciness and I have the strong tip. And given this might still be a little bit better of a slicer, the Sebenza 31 is probably in the middle, maybe, between sliciness. I don't have to slice all that much, but I do break down boxes sometimes, or sometimes you find yourself helping a friend move and you're cutting up a lot of boxes, and the 940 is not my favorite for that. Paramilitary 2 would be a little bit better, but I think this kind of gets the sweet spot with a robust blade, but you're not making a ton of compromises with its slicing ability. So that's one of the reasons why I love this blade shape so much, is because other pocket knives that I purchased, I felt like there was always kind of a compromise between the blade shapes. It just wasn't quite exactly what I was looking for. The other thing that I love about this small Sebenza is how compact of a size it is. So it's just got a lot of blade in a really small package, and so we can see it's much smaller than the 940 and looks absolutely tiny compared to a Paramilitary 2. But if we open up our PM2 and we open up our Sebenza, now look at those cutting edges. Pretty darn close, pretty much the same amount of cutting edge in both of these knives. But in your pocket, you have a much smaller knife. Now, if you notice me closing these knives and opening them with two hands, it's because this is my first time with a YouTube video and I'm looking at my phone, and so my depth perception is not quite perfect, but it's okay. I'm getting there, I'm practicing, trying something new. So the Sebenza 31, it just carries so well in pocket. Look how small that is. Obviously the Paramilitary 2 is going to be a lot better if you're wearing work gloves. That thumb hole in the larger size is going to be more hand filling. So if I was using gloves or doing yard work or something, I probably wouldn't pick this knife. The Sebenza is a little cramped. You can see my hand cramps a little bit when it opens it. It's not really that big of a deal, but if I was wearing gloves, I think it would be a little more challenging. So this knife's probably not a knife I would use if I'm wearing work gloves, but I don't wear work gloves very often. But if I was wearing work gloves, this would be a much more comfortable knife. Obviously, some people love the finger choil, and I've found that I just don't need it. I haven't missed having a finger choil with the small Sebenza. I also have found on the 940 that I don't miss having a finger choil. I don't really think finger choils are needed. I know on YouTube people say, oh, this finger choil is really great for getting in, doing detailed work. But for opening packages, cutting rope, cutting tubing, things like that, I just have never needed a finger choil. I don't think you need a finger choil for a lot of tasks. And so that detailed work might be work that I personally don't do. So maybe I just don't understand, the tasks that they're doing. But I don't need a finger choil for cutting up a piece of an apple or anything like that either. So finger choils are kind of irrelevant for me. But yeah, I just think it's really helpful to kind of see the blade shape on the 31 and to get a feel. It seems like such a small knife, but then when you realize that you're going to have the same cutting edge as a PM2, you might have a PM2, you might think, well, I've never felt like I didn't have enough blade to do the jobs that I do with my PM2. If that's the case, then you might really like a small Sebenza 31. It might be enough blade for you. If you have large hands, I have medium to large hands, so my hands aren't very big. Anything, you know, if you have extra large hands, you're probably not going to like the small Sebenza. It's probably going to be a little bit too small. So you can see that my hands fit perfect. You know, I have space to move around, whichever grip you want to do, pinch grip, just any kind of grip. I have plenty of room on that handle. And for me, I've noticed that the 3-inch blade length, I can actually pretty much do everything that I do. Now, I do like sometimes having a little bit more blade, having one that's 3.4, maybe 3.5 at the absolute most, but pretty much for the vast majority of tasks, I've realized that this 3-inch blade, or 2.9 if we're being like precise, this blade size actually is really great. You know, Ben Peters, what is up, guys? You know that Ben from Blade HQ, he always likes to be able to reach out and get close to that tip. You can do that. I think it's nice and controlled if you do a pinch grip and your blade is smaller. And so for just like the everyday tasks that I do, opening boxes, cutting zip ties, opening clamshells, cutting tubing, cutting rope, just pretty basic stuff, I don't really need much more blade length. So if you're worried that the small Sebenza 31 isn't going to have a long enough blade to really do a good amount of work or get things done that you want to get done around the house, it actually might have enough blade length, especially if you feel like a PM2 or a Manix 2 has enough blade length. Now, if you have something like a 940 and you have thought, hey, I wish the 940's blade was even longer, then the small Sebenza is probably not for you. I also think that if you do a ton of slicing, then this might not be for you. You might want to go with something from Three Rivers Manufacturing. Their blades are, you know, super slicey premium blades. So if just slicing like food prep, cardboard cutting, just passing through material is something that you really prefer, maybe you love the PM2 and you love the sliciness and you would be down for something even slicier than the PM2, because the PM2 does have pretty robust blade stock back here. So maybe you think, hey, this is slicey, I could go for something even slicier than a PM2. This might not be for you. So if you really love a super slicey knife, you can go with something else. But for me, this is kind of a jack of all trades. It's slicey enough to do the things that I do, where it doesn't bug me, but it also has that robustness, because sometimes I find myself in situations where I do some light prying or some heavier work and I want to make sure that my tip is safe. So hopefully that gave you some insight. Maybe this video helped you decide whether or not you want a Sebenza, whether or not the small is the right size for you. If you have any questions or any comments, if you leave me any thoughtful responses, then I'll definitely get back to you and I'll leave you a thoughtful response in return. So let me know if this video helped in the comments, or if you have any other questions about the small Sebenza that you would like answered. It's a great knife. It's really great with shorts because it's just this in the summertime. This is just so easy to carry and it's so functional. It's just one of my favorite tools. Let me know what your favorite knife is right now in the comments. Alright, I think that's it. I think from now I'm probably just rambling. Thanks again for watching. Take care.